My world that I want to have a little pride in. My world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am what I am.
Laura Harmon. Laura, welcome to LGBTlife and welcome to East Wall.
Thanks very much.
Yes, now you may have noticed on the way down we're now a shopping extravaganza because we've got Aldi up the road and Lidl have just opened. So if you've got a few pennies to spend, this is the place to be.
It's a great area.
Yeah. Laura, I've got to just put people in the picture. Over the last, I suppose it'd be 4 or 5 years now, almost every political rally that I went to, there was one consistency, and that was Laura Harmon was always there. And I thought that's remarkable that because there's such a gap in terms of geography, culture, age, and a whole range of things. And I thought to myself, it's wonderful to see ideas transcend, and that's what my generation hoped for. So great to see. Yeah. Come on that basis. Tell us about Laura Harmon, because certain things I only discovered from reading your An Seanad piece of paper. You grew up in the gaeltacht.
I did indeed. I grew up in Ballyvorna in the gaeltacht down in Cork.
Where is that?
It's northwest Cork, so if you're driving from Cork to Clarny, it's kind of just inside the Cork border, I suppose, from Kerry.
Yeah, you know we don't know anywhere above the Dublin Mountains. yeah. So
outside the pale.
So how large it is as a gaeltacht? I mean, or is it a place, where there's a couple of thousand people live, you speak Irish, but you go into the English-speaking schools or the local towns and things like that, or was it fairly self-contained?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's on a main road, so I mean, there's a lot of passing trade and people coming through. I went to an Irish-speaking primary and secondary school, so there'd be a strong, I suppose, Gaelic culture there, and Cooley, and lots of summer camps and people coming, in the summers, going to Irish college and things like that.
Tell me this, and because you say I'm fascinated by the way names translate around Ireland. Harmon is not a name I would immediately associate with a gaeltacht. What's the genesis of that in northwest Cork?
Yeah, it's an unusual one, I think. Well, my dad is from Kerry, so from kind of near Clorglen and County Kerry. So I mean, I don't know. It's an unusual enough name, I guess. I haven't met many Harmons, bar the people that I'm related to. Yeah. But I don't know the exact origin of it. But it's my dad's from Kerry, so yeah.
I suspect, like myself, that you got ethnically cleansed somewhere down along the track.
Somewhere along the way.
Because my mother's grandmother would have been Presbyterian, but of course you go forward 2 generations in 1916 and the next thing we're all saying Hail Mary, so I suspect the Harmons were the same in that regard. So, in that respect, growing up in a gaeltacht, was that what you saw as primary identity? That you were Irish speaking, you were Irish in in almost, no, I won't say a ghetto, but in a self-contained community.
I wouldn't necessarily say I had that, I suppose, perception. I mean, like, my parents wouldn't have been Gaeilgeoirs, so we didn't speak Irish at home, but we just in school. I mean, it was a very small community, that's for sure, close knit. Everyone knows each other down there, sure, yeah. Which is quite nice because there's a real community feel to it. But I mean, my mom's family would have lived in, they would have all been born in England. They would have come over here kind of in the late 60s, early 70s. So we would have had that kind of, I suppose, they would have had to adjust to that environment as well, I suppose, coming to a small Gaelic place. Indeed. From Middlesbrough, in the UK. So I suppose there was always that sense of outsideness as well, so I didn't necessarily feel like...
It's interesting you should say that, and the reason why I'm asking you this is because I grew up in the north inner city of Dublin, where anybody with a rural accent, you considered they were the oppressors. And anybody with a rural accent who spoke Irish, and that was invariably your teachers, the priests and the Gardaí, they were almost like an occupying force. And it was only when I got to about 18 or 19, I had a friend, Luke McCormack, who's a fine artist, and he said to me once, he said, Mick, the people in the Gaeltacht are fabulous. It's the Gael Giors, the ones that have the holiday homes down there and go down there for 2 weeks. They're the ones that we have to be worried about. And I saw the Gaeltacht in a different light when he put it to me in that regard. Yeah. Did you guys, how did you react to what Flann O'Brien talks about the Gaelgiors, the ones who have the holiday? They work for the Department of Education and they have a holiday home in Connemara that they go down there for 2 weeks of the year, and they're more Irish than the rest of us has put together.
Yeah, well, I think it's great, I suppose, that there's an interest. It seems to be an increasing interest in, Irish kind of arts and culture in general, and that includes, I suppose, the Gaeltacht. And I think it's probably a good thing that people want to invest in those areas and go there on their holidays, and I think it really promotes, I suppose, the tourism that we have in this country as well. So, people seem to be having more staycations now as well than going away. Yeah.
No problem at all about that. And as I say, where I have a cousin, you see, I should put it this way, and he's a Gaelgior, and he has a place out in Connemara. He was just awful. We were always made to feel that, well, Dubliners aren't real Irish. That you lot, you don't even speak like the rest of us, and therefore you should be able to willingly take this. And I'll be honest, for most people of my generation, we grew up with an antipathy about the language rather than a liking for it, which I discovered abroad.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think it needs to be taught better, the language. I think there needs to be more of a focus on speaking it. People sometimes come out more fluent in French or German from secondary school than they do in Irish. I think it's probably something that needs to be looked at. But I think, it's kind of each to their own whether people want to learn the language or not. And I think there's lots of definitions of what it means to be Irish today. And I have a great affinity to Dublin. I've lived in Dublin 8 now for 4 years. Consider it a second home in lots of ways. You can't take Cork out of the woman either, but I certainly would have a great love of Dublin since I've moved here as well.
It's different, isn't it?
Yeah, it is different, yeah.
Would you speak the language much now, amongst your friends or amongst people you would associate with?
Not a whole amount now. I would do, the odd interview maybe in Irish and go to some events, but I wouldn't get to speak it as much as I would when I was younger, so I've lost a lot of the fluency there, but certainly something, I suppose, it's nice to have it. And
look, the language I learned, I loved when I eventually got around to it, because like yourself, I did a huge amount of subjects through Irish, but it wasn't by choice. It was because we had a crazy teacher who insisted that we would do maths and geography and a whole range of subjects. I don't know about, how do you feel about the modern adaptation? Because I love the way older Irish was really wordy, and I mean W-O-R-D-Y, so you would have Finn, who was the son of Seamus, who was the son of Fiachra, and the whole way it described things was quite different than the direct translation that we tend to see now. How do you feel about that, Laura? Are you more a traditionalist or a modernist when it comes to the language?
Well, I guess it's the same, with every language really, tends to evolve over time. We'd see the same with English and, Old English and newer English, and I suppose it's just the way it is. I wouldn't be, I wouldn't feel very strongly, I suppose, either way. I think it's important to keep the traditions, but also for the language to evolve and become relevant in the kind of modern age that we live in as well.
You grew up you grew up in rural Cork, but you went to college in UCC.
I did indeed, yeah, and that's kind of where I
came of age, as we say. In many respects. Well, like most of us. I mean,
no, I think it's a great opportunity to be able to go, to college, and I'm really grateful that I was able to do that, and would have become politicised during that time, and kind of got involved, with the LGBT society, and the college would have come out as gay during that time.
Was that difficult?
It was very difficult, actually, yeah. It was very, very difficult. I suppose it wasn't something that I was used to talking about or had been exposed to, growing up, I suppose, well, in a rural area, maybe it just wasn't something that was ever discussed. So I think it did take a lot of time to come to terms with it myself, when I was in college, but I think it was one of the best things I ever did was coming out. And
no, the reason why I asked this, now just hopping back to the Irish language, is that when we were in secondary school and we had this teacher and he made us all go off and buy this massively expensive dictionary by Tomás de Walraha, you know, and it was the definitive Irish English dictionary. And we, of course, being 15-year-olds, let's look up all the rude words. And we thought, there's no rude words in Irish. You know, in other words, do they not do these things out there in, you know, beyond Tala? And I suspect that was part of the problem, is that there was no real language to identify yourself with.
Yeah, I think trying to find the words to verbalise it. I think that's something that, you know, it wouldn't be unique to people from Gaeltacht areas. I think certainly English people that, you know, grow up through the English language, I think it's hard to find the words to verbalise and to express.
At the best of times,
when you're growing up and all your school books are about, you know, John and Mary, and it's very heteronormative, and I think just being able to accept that there are different types of families, and to learn that it's okay to, you know, to be part of the LGBT community. So that was a great experience for me, and everyone was very accepting. My family, friends, neighbours didn't get any bad reactions, so I think I was very, you know, lucky in that way, and I know it's not the same for everybody.
Yeah, you clearly grew up in a family, and I suspect I did to that degree, that was far less dogmatic about religion. Just listening to you, it's like your family had transcended that aspect of our culture. Is that a reasonable assumption?
Yeah, that would be reasonable. I mean, I would have been raised, I suppose, Catholic, but in a very, you know, not in a strict sense in any way, and I wouldn't consider myself religious in any way now.
Yeah. Now, the reason why I asked that is because I've got another, you know, we've got plenty of friends who are LGBT, but I've got a friend who's from Kilkenny. He'd be about your age, and we were talking a couple of years ago, and he said he loves being gay, but he still has problems with the Catholic boy guilt, is what I would call it. In other words, that somehow or other that you're not quite doing something. Now, that was what my generation got. So I'm delighted to know that your generation had a completely different foundation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And my parents would be very open-minded as well, and certainly not strictly religious in any way. So I think that's quite, you know, freeing. I think people should be able to make up their own mind about religion and about, you know, what they believe in. I think each to their own, really.
Did you lose any friends over it?
No, not at all.
That's good, isn't it? I mean, again, that was one of the legacies that we are delighted to have said. This generation now can actually say these things in a way that my generation and my father's generation couldn't.
Yeah.
I ask people, because when I came back to Dublin in the mid-90s, and it was, you know, the LGBT scene was taking off, but there wasn't much of it there, and I had come back from Sydney, which was just pretty much LGBT Las Vegas. I suspect Cork was a bit quieter again than Dublin. I mean,
yeah, it was, but I mean, I suppose when I was in college there, it was all new, you know, and you're going out, there's new clubs, new people, and there is a great LGBT scene down in Cork. You know, you've got Chambers Bar, it used to have Loafers, that's closed now, but there is a great scene down in Cork, great community feel in Cork, and I mean, Dublin again is much different, I suppose, but it's been amazing over the course of the last few years. I mean, with the marriage referendum and everything else, and you know, prides that we've seen growing year on year, and the amount of people that fly in from abroad to come and experience our culture.
Well, it's something that we've been talking about here, is that board needs to get on board and say, hold on, lads, this is a gold mine for anybody who does it properly, because I had my cousin over from New York, and you know, he's just a year younger than me. He's been LGBT and out since about 1970, and you know, he says exactly the same thing. We can sell the idea that you can come here and get married, and everybody's going to love you. You know, nobody is going to be judgmental, and
definitely. And I think, I mean, you can see with people that aren't part of the LGBT community. I mean, they're coming over on hen parties and stag parties and getting weddings. I definitely think there's a lot of profit to be made there as well.
I would hope we'd be a bit classier.
Yeah. I'd say there'll be some amount of weddings now. I know a lot of my friends are getting married, so they're starting already. So it's incredible to see. It's great. It's amazing.
Tell me, the last time I think I saw you speak publicly, and you were saying that this was probably going to be the last time you spoke as president of USI, and it was in Merrion Square, and you were saying about how much you were looking forward to going back and voting. You'll remember the occasion now, how much you were looking forward to going back and voting yes in the school that you grew up in. Did it meet your expectations?
It did. I mean, I went with my parents and we went down to the school together and cast our yes votes for marriage equality. So it was really, it was an amazing experience to be able to do that, and purposely kept the vote at home for it. You know, I think it meant a lot to go back to the place where you're from and do that. And it was amazing to see that so many places voted yes, you know, and that my village at home voted yes. And the feeling of acceptance, I think, for many LGBT people was, you know, incredible and very empowering and validating. So it was just absolutely incredible. I'll never forget it. I think none of us that were there on the 22nd, 23rd of May last year will ever forget that experience and the feeling of it.
I'm pushing the idea that it should be a public holiday. We'll scrap the one in November, whenever it is, and let's put it in as Equality Day.
Sure, why not?
Seems
like a good idea.
Well, to me, it was just such a powerful statement, because you can be as self-affirming as much as you like, but it really only comes home when somebody says, yes, I agree with you. Was that the feeling you had on the 23rd of May?
Yeah, I think it was just incredible. I mean, just the feeling of joy on the streets and happiness, and seeing, you know, couples holding hands and, you know, being affectionate on the streets. And I just think it was an absolutely incredible moment. And I think, you know, we can lead the way now, you know, internationally as well. I think a lot of countries are looking to us for, I suppose, as an example as to how the campaign kind of was won here. And I think it was, you know, it was a very long term campaign. I mean, you know, I suppose when I came out a few years ago, we've seen a lot of changes, but this campaign started decades ago, and you know,
a very long time ago. I go back to the age when people got locked up. When people got electric shocks. I mean, the younger generation, I don't think, quite understands how rough the terrain was, but nevertheless, we have got to that point. Tell me, and this is something I've asked many people, particularly in the LGBT community, did you see that as a single issue campaign? In other words, what we're here for is marriage equality, or did you see this as, if you like, the springboard to an equality campaign, to a wider equality campaign?
Yeah, I think it was a mixture. I mean, it had to be focused because we were concentrated on winning this referendum, but I think you know, the differences this will make now for, you know, tackling gender stereotypes, for example, and, you know, for trans individuals as well. I mean, the gender recognition campaign that was kind of running concurrently with the marriage equality campaign was equally as amazing.
Extraordinary, wasn't it? Yeah. And this is why, you know, you're one of the remarkable people that I say I met along over the last 4 or 5 years. It did actually seem to bring out the best in Ireland, didn't it? And that, I think, is a really good bedrock for where we're going, whether we've got a government or not.
Definitely, and I think there's a huge amount of work to be done as well on the equality agenda, you know, outside of the LGBT community. I mean, there's incredible inequalities in our society, and I think you know, we can learn from what we've achieved over the last few years to work on those issues as well. I mean, issues around homelessness and, you know, direct provision and you know.
Okay, let's look at the Seanad, because I have said to people, because we try and be fair to, as we say, to the mainstream. And one of the things I try and be fair to the Taoiseach is to say, one of the things he got right, actually, was his nominations to the Seanad last time round. We got some really good people. We got some Gillian Van Turnhout and we got Katherine Zappone. Katherine has now been, as we say, elevated. It means there's a vacancy at the very least for an LGBT woman. I suspect that's not the way you'd like to be perceived, because when I read your literature, the one word that comes through clear as day is equality. Is that, if people were just to get one word stuck in their head about Laura Harmon, is that the one you would like?
Yeah, I'm glad you think that now, because that was the aim of the literature. Yeah. Absolutely, it's, you know, equality is kind of at the heart of everything that I stand for, whether it comes to accessing education, or whether it comes to repealing the 8th Amendment or extending the voting franchise out to all citizens for the Seanad. I think these are all equality issues, and if I am elected as a senator, that's what I want to stand for. I want to stand for, I suppose, those on the margins of society as well. I certainly don't want to be just locked up in the walls of Leinster House all of the time. I want to be out in the community. I want to be working with civil society, to help bring about changes for the future.
Well, something, and I've canvassed this with a couple of other candidates of saying, we're hearing a lot, and it reflects the balance in the Oireachtas at the moment. We're hearing a lot about, we must have a minister for rural affairs, and we might even need a minister for housing. Now, all of these things are good. I'm not disputing that, but to me, what there should be in that programme for government is we will have a minister for equality. In other words, all legislation from here on in, just like it should be child-proof, should also be equality-proof. How do you feel about that, Laura?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I do think that it would be a very broad brief, having an equality brief. I do think that
we'll evolve into it.
There is, yeah, and there is a need, I suppose, in terms of the housing situation. There is a need, I think, for more focus on that. And I mean, I think it's great to see that all the parties are coming together and they have a working group on the issue. But you have to kind of ask, I suppose, why didn't that happen 5-10 years ago? And we need to really put the focus on that now, because it is becoming, I suppose, a crisis, and the amount of people sleeping on the streets at night. I mean, it really is frightening to see it.
Yeah. In terms of gender equality, and I'm on record of saying that I believe women disproportionately suffer the burdens of government policy, and men disproportionately enjoy the rewards of government policy. How do you feel about that? It used to be much wider, but now the gap is narrowing. But it still seems to me that women still come out second best.
And I think we've seen across the world really that austerity policies do tend to negatively impact on women, I suppose, because women tend to be, I suppose, more often than not caretakers within society, and haven't been as valued in terms of that, in terms of things like childcare, which is extremely expensive at the moment. So it's harder for women, I suppose, to maintain in the workforce at times of recession than their male counterparts. Of course, that's not universally true to say either. But repealing the 8th Amendment is a big issue that I have highlighted, and I think that with the government formation talks that we're seeing at the moment, it could be more to the forefront, and I do worry about a Fianna Fáil or a Fine Gael government as to what priority that will get.
I was about to say, I can't really see it being too high up the agenda for Micheál Martin or Enda Kenny.
Yeah, and I think that's where civil society and I suppose the Seanad can play a role as well as keeping that on the agenda. I mean, we know from Amnesty's recent Red C poll that 87% of people are in favour of less restrictive abortion laws, and I think it's important that we have that kind of research as well, and that we're talking about these things in real terms and from a statistical point of view, because I think the debate tends to be very polarised sometimes. We get the impression that there are more people who aren't in favour of Repeal the 8 than there actually are, when in reality I think only about 5% of people are completely against abortion in all circumstances. But at the moment we're exporting it. I mean, 12 women per day are travelling, and I think that we need to face up to the reality that it is, abortion is a reality for Irish women, and it's something we need to address within Ireland.
We need to, as they always say about all medical issues, we need to make it patient focused. Just before we conclude, Laura, and unfortunately we will run out of time in a few minutes, you're standing for Senate reform, and I just a thought on this one. One of the things that disturbs me is the sense that we've got a Senate and we've got an architecture for putting people into the Senate. Now, particularly out in the areas where I live, most people don't get to vote, but yet we get the Auctioneer Society, they get a vote, and the Vintners Association, and a whole range of people, I'm sure they're worthy. I studied government in UCD, and one of the things that we were always told was that the Senate really was there. It was a consolation prize for rich Protestants. Times have moved on. So there's whole groups I would like to see represented in the Seanad, like LGBT, like travellers, like, sooner or later we're going to have more Muslims than Protestants anyway, so shouldn't they get a seat? What I'm just thinking is that perhaps instead of having to have some big constitutional reform, the idea came to me from the Irish Computer Society. They weren't around in the early days of the Seanad when we were putting that in. Could we not just up the groups that are allowed nominate? Is that a way of reforming the Senate? So we can have in the cultural panel, we could have Pavey Point. In cultural and education, we could have LGBT, we could have Tenny, we could have Glen, we could have a whole range of nominating bodies. Is that perhaps one way of reforming it?
Well, yeah, I think that that's something that can be done. People can, like organisations can apply to be nominating bodies for the different panels. But I definitely think that, what needs to be done is that every citizen should have a vote in the Seanad.
Yes, because you're on record of saying you support universal franchise for the Seanad.
And that can be done without a referendum. And I think that that's the most fair way to ensure that everyone in society has a say in electing their senators. I think it's deeply unfair that only a certain cohort currently have a vote in the Seanad. So I think that needs to change. We need to extend the franchise so that everyone has a buy-in and say in how the upper house is elected and how it's run.
Unfortunately, Laura, we're going to run out of time, and before I go, I just want to pay tribute to the passing of the controversial figure Howard Marks. I loved Howard. He was my generation, and Howard and I, we grew up as hippies, and our legacy, we always wanted, what's the next generation going to be like? And I'm delighted to say that Laura Harmon is continuing that great legacy of all those good things that came out of the 60s. We hope that she's going to there represent NUI in the Seanad. I'm Mick Fitz. We'll be back in a week's time. I want to say thank you to Heather for doing such a fabulous job on the phone. And Dublin Edition is coming up with the immortal Bernard Whelan.
That I want to have a little pride in my world, and it's not a place I have to hide in. Life's not worth a damn till you can say I am.